Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today for the Kendo UI R2 2016 release webinar. My name is John Bristowe. I'm a Principal Developer Advocate with the Telerik Developer Relations team. I'd like to thank you for joining us here today for this live event we have on GoToWebinar. I'm joined today by Cody Lindley and Todd Motto, who are members of our team. You can find out more about our team if you visit the Telerik Developer Network at developer.telerik.com. Today we'll be showing you all the great new things that we have in the R2 2016 release of Kendo UI. Now before we begin, I want to set some housekeeping items just so people are aware. Everything that you see here is available up online on our website at kendoui.com or on our demo site at demos.telerik.com. This webinar is being recorded and will be available shortly after this session up on YouTube. And if you have any problems, questions, concerns at all, please feel free to take advantage of that questions and answers panel. And we have people there who will be answering your questions. We also have some great prizes. This being a Telerik webinar, Kendo UI webinar, we have some great prizes for the best questions that are asked today. So if you have a question that you feel is burning within you and you have a question about Kendo UI, feel free to ask it. If we feel like it's one of the best ones that's been asked, we're going to be giving away a Myo gesture control armband for the best question. This is a really cool device that allows you to control all kinds of various things within your home and devices that you have around you. So feel free to ask those questions. We also have a BB-8 robotic little toy that we have here by Spiro that's really, really fun to play with, and we'll be giving that out to a random attendee for today's webinar. Also, I'd like to mention that one of the things that we do a lot with our webinars is make sure that we announce our prize winners and have a recap up on our blog site. So just so you're aware, you can go visit our blog site at telerik.com/blogs, and there you'll find, after this webinar, a summary wrap-up post of the webinar itself, along with your questions that have been posed, and we'll be there to answer them for any follow-up if you have them. And also, if you have any burning desire to read more about Telerik, you can go ahead and view the Telerik Developer Network page, which is at developer.telerik.com. There you'll find articles on all kinds of interesting things, including native scripts, Sitefinity, Kendo UI, and more. So we have up there our podcast, which is the Eat, Sleep, Code podcast. We have access to our user group and community resources. Again, this is developer.telerik.com, maybe your new homepage. We are here to talk about Kendo UI, everything that you need to build modern apps for both web and mobile. For those of you who aren't aware, we're actually coming up to our 5th birthday. The first release of Kendo UI shipped back in November 2011. And since then, we've had a really steady cadence of releases, including this one. It features over 70 beautiful UI components that you can use for your web and mobile application. Works everywhere, comes with a whole set of themes, supports all kinds of environments and frameworks out there, including Angular. And in this webinar today, we'll be talking about the new innovations we've added for this release that goes and takes that one step further. So to that end, I'd like to invite my colleague Cody Lindley, who's going to be talking to you a little bit more about some of the things that we have available within this release of Kendo UI. Cody, are you online? Are you available to show us some of the latest great?
Yep, I'm here. I think I just took control of the screen. Hopefully everybody can see my desktop now. Is that the case, John?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Great. So I feel very fortunate that I get to talk about 3 new things today with you guys. I get to speak to the new boilerplates I've been working on. I also get to speak about the new Kendo UI for React components that we're working on. And I get to talk about the Kendo UI CommonJS code that came out in the last couple of weeks. So I'm just going to jump in here and we're going to start looking at the Kendo UI boilerplates. And I just want to mention that these are pretty simple to find. You just Google Kendo UI boilerplates and you'll find them in GitHub. This isn't a private repo. This is actually in Kendo Labs. And here you can see it in my browser. Hopefully the font size is large enough. I bumped it up a little bit there, but first thing I want to call out is that we've created multiple boilerplates. They're all in the same repository. It's not like we're distributing multiple boilerplates across multiple repositories. The boilerplates are sort of divided as of right now into sort of 3 groups. We have original jQuery boilerplates based on the initial version of Kendo UI. We have some boilerplates around Angular 1, and we have some boilerplates around React. And you can see that here in this column, Kendo UI 4. So these are new in the last couple of weeks. They're free for you guys to go out there and toy around with. I'm just going to show one of them, and I'll show a couple of them throughout this demonstration. But all I'm doing here is clicking on this core jQuery, and we're going to go in here and look at this README. Now, I've already downloaded all of these boilerplates, and you can see them over here in Atom. I know this tree menu is a little bit small. I apologize for that, but essentially these are all the boilerplates, and I'm just going to open up the core jQuery one here. Now, I'm going to assume, for myself at least, that I have Node.js and NPM installed and that I'm good to go. With these particular boilerplates, you'll look at the prerequisites, and most of them require browser sync. So of course, we'll need to install Bower and browser sync for this, so I'll just go ahead and do that. I've already installed these things, so this is sort of smoke and mirrors at this point, but I just wanted to follow these instructions a little bit. I've already downloaded this repository, and that's what you see open in Atom right here. And so for this particular boilerplate, this uses the Bower package. And it seems I'm waiting here longer than I thought I would be. There we go. For all this to install. Again, this is the core jQuery package. And you can see it in the package JSON right here. And all I'm going to do here is run npm install, and this is going to install the browser sync tool that allows us to spin up a server and spin up this boilerplate, and it'll also do live reloading. And most of the boilerplates contain, I use this with most of the boilerplates. It's really an in-depth tool to use when you're developing, and I only briefly show the parts of it that allow us to serve up the boilerplate essentially. So we've got that installed. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Point for a lot of folks who want to get started with various frameworks that you have there. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. So now I've npm installed. So this. If you're looking at the package JSON, you see all I'm really installing is browser sync, so that's already installed. The next instruction here on this jQuery boilerplate is just a Bower install. And so I'm jumped over here to the terminal, doing a Bower install. This is actually going out and getting Kendo UI and any dependencies, which would be jQuery, and you can see those coming up in the terminal. And so at this point, since I've npm installed, I've Bower installed, this boilerplate's all set to go. And if we look up here in the scripts, in the package JSON and scripts, I actually have a command that I can run with npm run that will serve all this. So running that command, browser sync, basically just opens up, starts up a server and opens it up in the browser. And here we have Kendo UI all ready to run. This is showing Kendo UI calendar, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. But this is just a basic boilerplate to get you guys going. These particular calendar widgets are obviously the original jQuery plugin style, but this is just a demonstration of how to use that first basic boilerplate. I'm going to go ahead and close this server out because I'm going to open a couple of these up. So that's a basic boilerplate. The next thing we're going to jump into, and the one I'm most excited about are React components. A couple of months back, we started working on Kendo UI for React. We started out with very simple React components. If you're unfamiliar with React, I recommend just checking out the web page. Yeah, I just wanted to show a very general code example of a component. As you can see on my screen, this is a very simple definition of a component. It's just called a hello message component. We create it, we return some JSX, and then we render that thing to the page. And I'm sort of starting here in this basic way to just say we've taken this idea of creating components and we're creating Kendo UI components using React. And you can actually go out to NPM. These are all being delivered via NPM. And if you type in @Telerik/Kendo-React, you'll actually see a list of all the available Kendo UI React components. And these are the base ones. There's a bunch of them out there right now. We'll probably look at one of them, most likely React buttons today. But obviously, those being in NPM, they're all available via GitHub as well. And in fact, as of today, you'll find the documentation for all the React components in GitHub. You'll find all the examples and everything you need to get started. But I do want to mention, if you're looking for them in GitHub, you just need to go to GitHub, the Telerik account, and type in React. And you'll start seeing all the React widgets that I just showed you in NPM. Okay. So I think the way I'm going to introduce the React components is really just to spin up one of these boilerplates again and start looking at what's in that boilerplate, just to not only show the React components but show how easy the boilerplates are to get started. So I'm going to jump back over to Adam, and we're going to grab the core React Webpack boilerplate. I'm going to open that up in another window, make sure you guys can see it. And over here in GitHub, I already have this boilerplate open. And this is kind of the same thing. There's a prerequisite. You have to run npm install. We're installing Webpack and Browser Sync. If you're not familiar with Webpack, Webpack's helping us load the modules, ES6 modules that are dividing the components. The React components are divided into modules. Webpack in the browser is helping us load those modules. And I'll go over that a little bit more. But I'm not going to run this again. I already have Webpack installed globally in Browser Sync. Of course, I have it downloaded because I have it open here over in Atom. But I'm going to run this npm run Webpack. And this is a routine that'll stay open that runs. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to have to npm install. Nope. Well, let's do it anyways. Just to be safe, I'm going to open another browser window, npm install really quick, even though it looks like my Webpack did run. And as you can see, I set this boilerplate up so that when npm, when Webpack's running, it's actually telling you all the modules that it's loading. And we can examine that again here in a sec. But I think we're good. So I'm going to jump back over here, and it looks like Webpack's running. It's meant to continually run as we're building. So I'm going to open another window here. And before I run this npm, I'm just going to show it to you. Here are the two scripts. You can see I ran this Webpack command first, and now I'm just going to run this server one. You also see it over here in GitHub in the instructions. So if I do npm run server, I'm going to be serving this boilerplate, and this boilerplate actually contains a bunch of Kendo UI for React components. All right, the font's a little bit big there, but all I did here was run two npm commands, started up Webpack, and then I started up the server, and basically Webpack's going through and bundling this and creating this page of Kendo UI React components, and this is the button components. So let's look here. This is the index page. I'm actually just pulling in the bundle that Webpack's creating for us. Let me open this config file. For those familiar enough, I just have to define which file is my entry file. You see it right up here. I'm going to open that entry file now. And this is really a miniature app in itself, but I'm using Webpack to basically import React, import React DOM, and my screen's, the font's a little big here, but as you can see, I'm importing Kendo Ui React buttons. Now, what you didn't see here is obviously you can go out to NPM and install these React buttons. I just had this set up nicely because I'm using the boilerplate. But I think it still demonstrates how easy it is to get these components into this module, this main app module. You know, because we're dealing with UI components, we not only have to import the code, the React code itself, we have to import style sheets. And using Webpack, we can actually write an ES6 import statement, and that's what you see on this next line I'm highlighting. I'm importing the style sheets for the buttons as well. I'm also just showing how simple it is to create your own modules. I created this little math module and I threw it in here as a demonstration. But as we get past all these imports, the bulk of this file is actually the usage of these React components. And if you're familiar with React, this should look pretty common. Here's a component definition for a button container. And here I'm rendering out components into the DOM. And as you can see all these components in this app.js file in this browser window over here. And here I'm encapsulating another component inside this top-level component, this button container up above here. But the main point I think I want to show here is that all I'm doing is importing these Kendo React buttons, and then I'm using them, and you see them in use right here. Webpack's sort of helping us bundle this all up. A couple things to mention about these React components would be that they are grouped components. And what I mean by that is it's not, we're bundling, maybe a better word is bundle. We're bundling some of these things. So if you think about the original widgets, we might have like a button group and a button, and they might be sort of separate widgets, but the way we've started doing this is we're bundling some things together. So if I go back, let's see here. Here I am at the Kendo Ui React Buttons GitHub repository, and I just wanted to grab some code out of here. For example, I'm just going to grab this Kendo React Buttons button group. And the point I was trying to make is that not only does this package contain buttons, but it contains the button group. And so it kind of wraps up a couple of different widgets. And so technically, here are my buttons. I should be able to just grab that set and drop it in here. And this, I don't have one of these on the page yet. I don't have a button group. But if I hit save over here at Atom, browser sync's reloading this page. It's detecting that Webpack's rebundling this thing. And as you can see, now I've just got this button group down here at the bottom. So hopefully those people who are familiar with React, this is a pretty simplistic explanation of how to use the React Kendo UI components. And those who aren't, hopefully can grab this boilerplate and go to the GitHub repository for Kendo UI React buttons and start playing with these two things very easily. The other thing I want to point out is just that over here, when I did hit save, we can see in this other terminal, this other process, Webpack doing its thing and reloading the browser. It's pretty handy. Let me see, what else can I say about these things?
So Cody, just want to jump in here for a second. So just for folks, just to be clear, we've got a initial set of React components now available up on GitHub. They've been scoped through the Telerik organization up on NPM, so that's why you see that @ symbol there. We've got a whole bunch of controls that are now available, so people can start using them, seeing things like inputs, animations, dialogues, etc. And so if people are using React today, these are some of the things that they can start getting their hands dirty with.
Yep. Available out on NPM. I've got that up on the screen right now. Obviously, you can search for them on GitHub and find them if you just filter by React. And just want to clarify that all the documentation and all the code examples are in GitHub along with the code as well.
Awesome.
And I think one thing if I didn't already mention it, I'm pretty excited that these packages are now semantically versioned, which is a departure from how we were doing it before. So I think that's an interesting thing to bring up. Let's see here. If I know that these boilerplates, maybe a good thing to do would be to make a distinction here. When I created most of these boilerplates, and I think that word can be ambiguous, but really these boilerplates are just a starting off point to get you guys rolling. They're not super opinionated. It's hopefully just enough to not block you guys from playing around with this code. None of them are what I would call app seeds, where we actually get more opinionated and really direct you guys on how to take these parts and build a legitimate app. And there, truth be told, some of these boilerplates will require some knowledge, obviously a little bit of knowledge about what Webpack's doing, obviously how React works and stuff like that. But I do want to mention that if you really want to get going fast and you don't want to mess with a boilerplate, I actually created a little screencast about using a command line tool. One of the cool things about Angular 2 is they offer a command line tool to get people going really fast. Well, this NWB tool does this as well, and it's about a 10-minute screencast. So if you just want to get to the React Kendo UI components as fast as you can, I put together a 10-minute screencast on how to use this command line, and that's available.
That looks great.
Yeah. So I'm going to close this boilerplate and let me kill these processes.
One more thing I just wanted to mention to folks, because it's come up on the questions and answers pane, is this a subset of what we have available today in Kendo UI proper? And the answer to that is yes. We are working simply with the controls that we're working with today. We don't have the more complicated controls like the grid or the scheduler available via React at this point. We're simply working from the bottom-up approach, where we have a consistent and common component base, and then building towards providing JSX isms of the button and various other simple controls available in Kendo UI.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that in order to build those more complex components, we had to get the baseline components right, and so we're spending the appropriate amount of time creating all the little parts that build up the bigger components. But those larger, more sophisticated, more robust components have yet to be released. I think we're still laying the groundwork.
Cool.
And so I think I'm running into other people's time here, so I'll speed up here a little bit. This last thing I'm going to talk about again is some of the new Kendo UI packages available on NPM, and as well as a private GitHub endpoint. If you guys aren't aware, in the last couple of weeks we released the original version of Kendo UI for jQuery as common JS modules, and this was really exciting news to me because I have spent the last year trying to get the AMD versions to work with tools like System.js and Webpack, and I could always get them to work, but I always felt like I was dialing 20 different dials to the perfect setting in order to get it to work perfectly. But now that the Kendo UI Core and the Kendo UI Professional code is wrapped in CommonJS, using Webpack and System.js to use modern JavaScript and ES6 modules is very simplistic, and actually have a boilerplate to show this as well. And so we'll spin this thing up. So I'm just opening up. Yeah,
While you're doing that, Cody, can I just ask, for folks who don't know, can you briefly explain why that's significant, like why CommonJS is a significant improvement to that scenario?
so I'm trying to separate System.js from Webpack here in my mind. I think the simplest way to say this is since the original format of the modules themselves moved from AMD to CommonJS, and CommonJS was what something like Webpack wants to work with, it just worked easier. And I think probably the same is true with System.js. When it went to that format, everything was just smoother. Because that is the format that those solutions wanted to work with as a baseline.
Right.
Yeah, so here's another, this is a boilerplate I have all set up for you guys. It's called Core jQuery Webpack and ES6. Let's open this up at GitHub. Again, prerequisites is just telling me to install a couple of things. And I'm just going to jump right to, we'll assume I did an npm install here. I don't want to waste any more time. But I am just going to run this Webpack. And this should build everything up, and we'll get a built file, which is always good. I do want to point out, maybe it's obvious, but I am going to say it. One of the advantages of using Webpack and CommonJS Kendo Ui jQuery is that you're only loading what you need. So if we jump in here to our app, and this is pretty similar to the other Webpack solution we were looking at for React when Webpack's involved, I'm just importing CSS. I'm importing this drop-down. Here I'm importing jQuery, and here I'm just importing the drop-down. And what this is going to do is, using Webpack, it's going to only include the dependencies for that drop-down list. Webpack will only build the parts that are dependent on that, and so we don't have to include all of jQuery if we do this style of development. So I'm going to open up another terminal here, and we're going to run the server just so we can see that. Browser sync does its thing. It pops open a browser window. And here I am, I'm serving a Kendo Ui jQuery dropdown. I'm using just the dropdown list, and Webpack is figuring out all the dependencies for me. I don't have to manually go in and put only the dependencies for that dropdown list in here. And this is a main advantage, in my opinion, to using Webpack. As well, the advantage being that we're writing more modern ES6 module code.
Yeah, I think that's really great. Previously, customers who are on the call know that we have a downloader component tool that you can use online that would allow you to pick and choose the components you want. This is a much more graceful scenario, I guess, going forward with this.
Yeah. I knew I moved through a couple of those boilerplates pretty quickly, but I do want to mention a lot of the boilerplates, I didn't just stop at the JavaScript. All of the Webpack ones, most of the ones I've set up, they sort of assume that you want to import things like CSS. So for instance, this boilerplate, it allows me to import CSS just like it's a JavaScript module. Or if I want to import text, here I'm importing a text file as the template for this dropdown. Or if I want to import JSON. This is just a very simple way to manage modules, import the stuff you need, and use it. And I think this is kind of what these boilerplates really help you get started with.
Great.
And I think that's pretty much it from me, unless John, Todd, you guys got any questions in the context of what I'm speaking. I think I can pass it off to Todd.
All right.
Cool. Let me broadcast.
We do have a lot of questions. This is just me filling airtime while Todd's switching over to presenter. We have a lot of questions. We're seeing them come in, folks. So thanks for continuing to ask those questions. They're great questions. We're going to try and tackle as many as we can near the end of this presentation. I know you guys have a lot of questions around Angular and stuff. What Todd's going to talk about here is more around the the innovations we've done in the editor, as well as talk a little bit to what we've done around Angular. Todd, take it away.
Cool. Thanks, John. Can you hear me okay, everyone?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Awesome. So, yeah, we've got a couple of things to talk to everyone about, starting off with my fake blog, which I put together. And we're basically going to be looking at the Kendo Editor. So everything in here and everything that I discuss will be made available. So if you kind of want to look at things afterwards, then you can find the GitHub repo will make that available as well. So there's four new features and stuff that we want to demonstrate today. So one of them is the Markdown support that has recently landed. Hopefully you can see this. I'll blow it up a little bit bigger. So we've got this. Yeah, we've got this text editor here. So one of the things is the Markdown support for that. So we're going to actually show you how to do that. Auto URL detection. So when we type stuff, it automatically converts to URLs, and how to sort of control the serialization of what a user types in, and then we can sort of parse things if we need to or want to customize like content or formatting, which is how we actually do Markdown to HTML conversion using a couple of libraries. And then I've got a bunch of links here which we'll briefly kind of go through, which are also in the fake blog post disguised as further reading, so you've got like a nice little list here at the end that you can go through. So yeah, let's start with the Markdown stuff. So we've got two files which you basically need. So one of them is called markdown.js and the other one's md.js. So this should look pretty familiar if you've used well, any of the Kendo widgets, to be honest, or the actual editor itself. So I've just got a variable here which corresponds to our editor, which is simply this text area here. And I think you can use any element here, but if you want to use a text area, what it means is you can actually put like some pre-existing content, like if you're doing like a server-side render or something like that. So a text area is pretty good, so then we can grab the contents of the HTML and then do some parsing or convert things from Markdown to actual HTML. So let's assume that you're building something and you've just included these Markdown files, and these kind of tie into this serialization stuff. So if we actually do some console logs here, I'll just give you a quick demo of what we can actually see and how we can actually control things. So I'll put a little comment in here saying that one's going to be our deserialize and that one can be our serialization. So when these custom callbacks get called, we basically get an HTML string passed to us in both of them, so we can just log those out and then see what they actually give us. So this is actually before things get parsed. So at the minute there is absolutely nothing in there. There's an empty p tag. I think that's probably a default. So if I wanted to actually, let's make it a bit more interesting and comment these out for now. There we go. So I'll put hello, my name is Todd, and then I can click update, and you see here we've got these. I'll blow them up slightly. So we've got deserialization, hello, my name is Todd, and then serialization, which gets called a couple of times. So what we can actually do is take this, probably be a bit cooler if we used some Markdown. So there we go. So the serialization is kind of the callback where we can capture like a raw contents of the actual editor itself. Then we can basically use this Markdown file and convert it to HTML. So if what we'll do first, before we actually, we'll create converted, and then we'll do converted equals. So we'll parse it to Markdown, and then we'll just log it out here as well.
So just so folks know, those two libraries you have referenced are actually third-party libraries. They're not ones that we've created, the Markdown and MD libraries, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah. Probably want to do the same in the other one, so we'll do converted. converted.
Those folks who are wondering, these were APIs that weren't available in the editor before. So these are now new hooks that you can add to your customization that will allow you to basically take the whatever is being pumped into the editor, look at it, serialize it, as well as deserialize it. Before, these weren't exposed to you.
Yeah, exactly. And just to, I'll give you a zoom out quickly. So we have this panel which kind of fits in the middle of the screen nicely. So you can see when I drag the browser, it kind of sits in place in the middle of the screen. And then, yeah, so I'm just basically zooming in so it doesn't look strange when you're actually using it yourselves. So if I, let me give this a refresh just to make sure. And then we'll do something like testing. When I click on update, so you can see this deserialization callback here. Hopefully you can read this okay.
Yep, looks good.
Cool. That's bumped it down to 2 lines. So essentially, the deserialization callback is getting called. We get this HTML argument, which isn't, it's not really HTML, it's just a string. And then I've created a variable called converted where we actually call this markdown. So we basically tell it to parse the markdown into HTML by calling the aptly named toHTML function. And then I'm logging it out next to the actual raw string. So you can see them side by side. And if you've not used Markdown before, a simple hash is like an H1 tag, such as this, and then 2 is then H2, and so on. So that's exactly what it's doing in the demonstration. So if we actually comment these, we'll get rid of these for now. So what this will do is, now we've uncommented the function, this will actually return it to the actual editor, and then we'll basically see the markdown being rendered. So I can create some titles, and then I can say, let's create some list 1, I can do list 2, and we can press update, and there you go. So it's pretty simple, and you can see that the H1 has been parsed, the single hash has been parsed to an H1. We can actually inspect element here. Let's get rid of some of this. There we go. So yeah, if you're using Markdown, then a asterisk, which I entered into the field, actually passes out as a list item, so you can see how easy that is. And I've used like just a fake blog example here because this is kind of a nice tool if you've got like a CMS or something like that, that you can use this capabilities inside. The other cool thing that we can do with this is, let's say you decided to say, great blog, check out my blog because it's awesome too, and then you can be like HTTP, and if you watch carefully here, so we can do awesomeblog.com, and then you see when I press space, this is now being converted to a hyperlink. So this is pretty cool, and I'll just inspect element just so you can see the actual source code there. So when you put links and stuff in, they automatically get parsed to a hyperlink, which is really great. Like if you've got like non-technical team members or some kind of what do you call them, a writer that wants to type something into your CMS perhaps or something like this, then it's great not to have them to learn HTML in that kind of sense, so that it kind of picks it up automatically for you.
And this is a configuration setting that we can turn on and off as well, so you don't have to have this set by default if you don't want.
Yeah, exactly. So I've got a link to the docs, which we'll whiz through at the end. So yeah, there's 2 pretty powerful features. I mean, you don't have to parse to Markdown. And just for those, if you've noticed that Maruku word, that's like a style of, I googled it and it's like a Ruby parser to Markdown, so that's like the formatting that it basically uses or expects to be passed into the Markdown formatter. So yeah, I mean, you don't have to convert to Markdown, you could do something completely different, but this gives you an idea of what you can actually do. And blog comments, nobody likes writing tons and tons of HTML, so just to be able to do this and then, you know, sort of title and then scroll down, press update, it gets called, it gets parsed out to HTML. So there's also some other cool things here. So I've got a cool blog commenter. So if I'm a commenter on somebody's blog, I can basically, so this works in like a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word document. So what you can essentially do is copy these, go back to the actual box, and when you press paste, it actually keeps the formatting for you. So this is actually quite nice. Again, it takes away that like need for some kind of technical HTML knowledge. So you can actually just paste stuff. You can type a hyperlink and it becomes a hyperlink. So that makes a lot of lives easier. So if you can see this, we actually have this option which is just on the configuration object for the actual HTML editor, and there's loads of different options here for, we call it the paste cleanup. So it kind of what is in your clipboard and when you can paste. So that kind of you can kind of have control over it. So if we say keep new lines, so we can say true, this essentially will stop it. So if we then paste this, you can then see that nothing has actually been formatted. So that works quite nicely. So you have kind of full control. You can turn these features on and off. What else have we got? So that's pretty much it for the new editor. I mean, it's quite simple. It gives you a lot of power and flexibility. And then I've actually included these in the blog as some further reading themselves. So first off, we have the HTML editor documentation. So you can go here. This will be available at the end, or you could just Google Kendo UI HTML editor. This will bring up this. It looks slightly different because I'm on a mobile kind of view. There we go. So it kind of gives you a walkthrough. We've got the paste cleanup and all the options and stuff like this in there. So you can actually, there's a live demo here of what you can tick and untick and then actually see in real life without actually trying it, what different paste options will do when you tick these buttons. So that's really neat. And then what else have we got? So the rest of these, we might as well go to, Cody's mentioned this, and then we'll start on some of the Angular stuff. So I've included a link here to just our NPM. So before we dive into the Angular stuff, if you keep an eye on this at Telerik, so you can actually wait and expect for things to come in the Angular world at some point. So we'll start from the top. I've got a blog post which I've just included, which is on the Telerik Developer Network. So this was January, so only a few months ago. But this kind of gives you an overview. If you haven't heard what's coming with the Kendo UI and Angular 2, then this will give you a great sort of overview of what's going to happen, what's coming, what's the plans. So I would definitely recommend giving that a read if your team's using Angular or thinking about changing to Angular 2 or upgrading to Angular 2. It kind of gives you a future focus article there. So GitHub, let's open this one up. So we've also got the GitHub account. So there's not a huge amount on here, but this is essentially like a roadmap repository. So you can go on Telerik/Kendo-Angular 2, and there's loads of discussions and things going on here where you can sort of keep track of the progress of things. There we go. So we should match the React counterpart. So that actually ties in nicely with Cody's demo of the React button. So you can then shortly be able to do this, the exact same stuff with Angular 2. So there's basically where to keep track of these things in this repository. And then finally, we have another repo which kind of gives you a nice, you can NPM install it and run things locally, but it gives you an idea of what kind of, some kind of examples using the Kendo components and all this kind of stuff, which looks pretty similar to what Cody was showing earlier. So importing some styles and creating our own Kendo Angular components, etc., etc. So yeah, all of these will be available, all the source code as well. So if you're trying to scramble these together or want to look at these quickly, they'll be available pretty shortly. And then I'll pass you back to John.
All right, thanks a lot, Todd. That's great.
Any other questions?
Not at the moment, thanks.
Cool.
So what I'd like to do at this point is just to provide a summary recap, and then we're going to go through some of the questions. So I'll just jump back over to my environment here. So for those of you curious, you can go check out our repo just one last time. It's at github.com/Telerik. Do a search there for anything that you wish. You can see we have the React components there. We have the building blocks for a lot of our Angular 2 work that's also being done. One last thing I just wanted to mention, because of the spirit of time, I don't have a lot of time to quickly show this, but we have a new widget control called the vertical box plot. As you guys know, I'm a big fan of data viz, and this is another component that you can use. This one's actually quite useful in scenarios where you're viewing data on a mobile device. What the vertical box plot does is it provides basically a rendering of a whole bunch of data, including mean, median, mode data, maximum, min values, etc. And it works really, really well in scenarios where you're running on a mobile context. So, for example, a mobile device, as by way of example here. So that provides that context there, and it's something you can check out up on our demo site, which is one of many that we have available to you. So just to wrap up here on some of the things we wanted to mention, then we'll get to the questions. You can find all the demos available up on demos.telerik.com. Also, don't forget to check out the Telerik Developer Network, which is at developer.telerik.com. There you'll find articles by myself, Todd, Cody, etc. on these and other types of subjects that we've already discussed as well. If you also want to talk a little bit more about testing, I just want to mention here that we have a wonderful tool called Telerik Test Studio, which allows you to not only record but play back automated tests that you'll generate for Kendo Ui widgets, as well as ones that are built on top of Angular and React applications. So if you want to find out more, we've got a link here at the bottom. What this allows you to do is basically get more information about what's going on relative to Test Studio. Check it out there. And with that, what I'd like to do is start jumping into some of the questions. And this is going to be sort of just kind of an open Q&A here. We've got a ton of questions here. And Cody and Todd, the best way I think we'll tackle this is just by going through some of them that we've seen here and address them sort of individually as we go through them. There were some questions around, obviously, the support that we have going on around our widgets and stuff. The work that we've done for this release, just so folks will know, because we have the questions of things like what's going on with widgets and such. This release was largely focused on our work around React and providing that common base with Angular. You saw Todd's mentioning of the editor widget itself having those new APIs available for deserialization and serialization. We have the vertical box plot as well. There's new innovations that we've done to the spreadsheet, but they're relatively minor. We have multi-line editing within cells and things like that, and we've summarized a lot of those in the blog post. But the main focus here was to focus on the boilerplates that Cody's written, the work that we've done around React and Angular, and talk a little bit briefly about the editor control that we've done. If you guys want to tackle a question, feel free to do so, Cody and Todd. I'm just going to jump through while we have a little bit of time left to go through some of the questions here and see what's available.
Yeah, John, I just want to highlight the fact that the widgets themselves, nothing's changed. Just because we are working on React components doesn't mean there's been any change to feature releases, bug fixes. If you go and look at the release notes, they're just like the release notes of every other release. And so the jQuery widgets are not being diminished in any way whatsoever. That was a goal as we created React components. The goal is to simultaneously continue to do what we're doing. So I just think that's an important thing to note.
No, that's good to know. We do have a question here, which is interesting for you, Cody, which is, are there NuGet packages for these boilerplates available? And my suspicion says no, but you could probably speak to that.
Yeah, as of right now, there is not. But obviously, I mean, these boilerplates being in GitHub, anybody could grab them and do anything they want with them. So I'd say let's see if we can't do that. I'd love to see the boilerplates used on multiple places. So.
Yep. We have a few questions here around our Angular 2 support. Obviously, that work is ongoing. Angular 2 changed a lot of things. Obviously, you know, they have a new data binding syntax. They have, a new router. I think this month is yet another new router. We've got a whole bunch of things that we have to contend with. So obviously that work is ongoing. We're keeping a very, very close eye on that. As many of you know, we've got really good support for Angular within NativeScript as well. So obviously we're keeping very, very close eye on that as well. But that's the sort of thing that we're trying to work towards as part of Kendo Ui as we go through it. Just looking at some of the other questions here. Here's a question that I don't know. It says here, what package loaders will you support for Angular 2 out of the box? Cody, Todd, do you guys want to tackle that one?
If they mean, if what they mean by package loaders is System.js or Webpack, I mean,
Yeah.
Angular 2 by default is System.js.
Yeah.
I know, and maybe Todd could speak to this, I know they've been, so from the core team itself of Angular, it's System.js, but I know that people in the community have been working on a Webpack version.
Yeah, Webpack seems to be. I actually did a poll the other day, and Webpack was like 90-something% out of the choice over System.js. So, but yeah, all the Angular docs actually show System.js, but it's just 6 modules. So bundling is completely in your control. So you're not tied down to System or Webpack, or you can use anything that will bundle.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I noticed we got a couple of questions about, will I use System.js or I use Webpack? And I do want to note that where it was appropriate, I actually presented both boilerplates. So if you want to use CommonJS, you have a choice between Webpack and System.js with the boilerplates. And the same thing for React. I created boilerplates for both. So from our perspective, we really wanted to provide multiple choices because we know not everybody develops the same.
Gotcha.
And I would imagine we will do so for Angular as well.
Gotcha. So. There's a question here that talks about, is there a boilerplate available for a SharePoint add-in? I can speak to that. I recently wrote an article on the Telerik Developer Network about writing SharePoint add-ins. I know that when people talk about SharePoint, they don't. Some people enjoy it, some people hate it. I understand that. There isn't a boilerplate for SharePoint add-ins at the moment. However, there are templates that do ship with Visual Studio. I know that Microsoft's doing work around SharePoint Foundation, which is the, I guess, evolution of SharePoint development that's coming about. At the moment, we don't have a boilerplate for that, but if that's something that you think is worthwhile, please feel free to send that feedback to us. And by the way, I should note, or I'd be remiss in not saying that we do have a feedback channel that you can send all your suggestions to. Which you can check out. So do feel free to send us that feedback if you wish. We've got some other questions here. So what is in Kendo Ui that is missing in React? What is the end goal? Seems like missing overall use case. Great question. So the question here really, it's kind of like a so what question. What's the big deal? The reason why we're doing work around React is because obviously a lot of developers like using React. They like the expressiveness of JSX and putting them into your JavaScript files and utilizing the virtual DOM and the tooling that's available, et cetera, et cetera. And so really we're trying to make our widgets available to that environment. That's the real answer to that so what question. And for a lot of folks who aren't using React, I understand. Like you're like, okay, I don't understand why this is important. That's fine as well. So the end goal here is basically to provide choice for anyone who's doing anything, and that's always been the design goal for Kendo. Like Kendo Ui itself has a long heritage of providing integrations with a variety of different frameworks, whether it be them things like Knockout, etc. And we want to just make sure that our customers have the best support going forward for those frameworks that are coming about, like React. And so that's really the end goal for that. There's a question here about, has the dependency for jQuery UI been removed? It never existed. jQuery UI and jQuery are two different things. We do have a dependency on jQuery, and we've recently updated to the latest V1 tree. So that's something that's new in this release, is that we've updated to latest V1 tree, which I think is like 1.9 some, or I think it's actually 2 now. But jQuery UI is not a dependency. It's jQuery proper.
Yeah, and to clarify for the React components, we didn't take the jQuery code and try and force that through a React component. The React components were built from the ground up with no jQuery dependency.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
It says
similarly
here,
with the Angular as well.
oh, okay, yep. It says here, using jQuery is a lot of work, but sometimes you can use CSS to accomplish what you need. For example, you can clear a selection in Kendo Ui Grid. How are these components make such things such as clearing a selection more convenient or powerful to the programmer? Well, the main reason why jQuery exists is it's sort of like a polyfill. It smooths over some of the cracks that existed between browsers back in the day. These days, it's an abstraction on top of the DOM. It's always existed as an abstraction on top of the DOM to make those things simpler. That's not to say that you can't do these things in CSS. Just doesn't mean that it may be cross-browser compatible. So to answer your question there, yes, there are obviously use cases where CSS is going to be a heck of a lot easier, and in fact a lot more efficient as well. In some cases, CSS will target the GPU, whereas in jQuery and JavaScript-based, you're obviously targeting the VM there. But that being said, the reason why we utilize jQuery is because of that ability to have cross-browser compatibility.
Yeah, I think it also makes sense when you've got like a model view controller or model view model like web application where something like clearing a selection might be part of a data model itself. So
yes,
driving those changes through JavaScript would make more sense so you can maintain the state
as well. There's another question here. There are plans to include visualization components available in D3.js. D3.js is a very powerful visualization library. They've got a whole bunch of visualizations there. We are trying our best to make sure that our visualization library is as good as it can be. That being said, I'm sure there's going to be a widget or two that you'll find in other libraries that don't exist in Kendo Ui. Again, send us that feedback if you feel there's something missing there. Question here says, so Q2 release, well, it's called the R2 release, is completely new implementation of controls components, isn't it? I guess from the React side and Angular side, to a certain extent, yes. I mean, they're not re-implementations, but they are new things in a sense. But they're not they're the same old controls that you come to know and love going forward. That's for sure. By the way, I'm hogging the airwaves, guys. I'm just going through some of the questions here. If you see any questions that you think they're mentioning, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I think I'll add a couple of clarifications here that I see. So what version of React are we currently operating on? We're current. So the most recent release that they have works with the Kendo Ui components. I also want to clarify that if you go to the Boilerplate GitHub page, below the table that lists out all the boilerplates, you'll see a link to a couple of other examples using Browserify and TypeScript. And both of these examples are focused around the CommonJS version of Kendo Ui for jQuery. But those are there, so if you are a Browserify or TypeScript person, you can find those linked on the GitHub page for the boilerplates.
Mm-hmm. Todd, did you have a question you wanted to tackle? Because I've got some others here.
Yes, I think I was David. Would the React components work with Riot.js? So I've used a little bit of Riot.js, and it's kind of like a micro replacement or similar. It looks very similar to React in some ways. I think you could probably manage to render something, but they kind of do the same job, so it's kind of pointless, I guess, if you wanted to. Like if you're using Riot, which is very, very similar, like with it's got like a JSX kind of pattern as well, like with the templating syntaxes, then it may make sense just to use React because it looks very similar, and it kind of you use like a custom element and you put your styles in there and scope them and then JavaScript, whereas React is basically that but in a JavaScript object. So
right.
Yeah, I mean if you're thinking about that, then you can, like, you're potentially creating two view layers, so
yeah,
it might make sense to just stick with one view layer.
So I've got actually a question, comment, statement from Jim Duffy, who's our newest member of the Kendo Ui team. He says, you could mention that we're going to release our Kendo Ui for Angular 2 beta in the September 2016 timeframe. So there you go. So he's messaged me telling me that. So there you go.
Yeah, and I actually believe I mean I heard announced on Twitter that there should be an update here at the end of the month, beginning of July, some sort of preview somewhere. So do watch the blogs and PDN. So
here's a great question: is there any plan to include some TypeScript examples for the various Kendo UI widgets in the docs? I guess if what I would say to that is, well, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, so at the moment I don't believe we have any plans. But again, if you have a need for that, let us know. I'm seeing another comment here. NuGet support would be awesome. So Cody, there you go. There's your next feature. What else we got? So I have some questions about the editor itself. The thing to be clear about is that, I mean, those APIs look really simple, but they are extremely powerful. And what I mean by that is that they now give you hooks into the serialization engine that drives the editor itself. So a lot of people would look at that and say, like, big deal, I don't really use Markdown, etc. But think about the possibilities there in terms of what you can do. You can now filter output, you can filter input, you can parse, you can modify, you can format. Those are things that now those two APIs now enable. So that's the thing to remember there. There is a question here around Bootstrap 4 on the roadmap. I will reference a blog post that we have available, which Rumen wrote earlier back in May. I'm just showing here up on the screen. At the bottom of the blog post itself, we did talk a little bit about the preview release of our SaaS theme for Bootstrap 4. Obviously, depending on what side of the less versus SaaS debate you fall on, one of the things that we have available is some of the work that we're doing around our Bootstrap integration. We do have a repo that you can check out there, which is linked here on the blog post. So if you want to check that out, you can. Great question. Just going through the last few questions here that we have. We have a few minutes remaining. Let's see here. What else we got? I guess the English is not the first. What is the most purpose to build Kendo UI boilerplate? Cody, you want to give a summary? Like if someone were to ask you in an elevator, so what's the deal about these boilerplates? What would you say?
I think it's twofold. I think for me personally, there's times when I just want to kick something out or write some code or test something, and I don't want to go through the ceremony of setting up things depending upon even the most simplistic jQuery version versus the more complex Webpack and System.js. I just want to grab something out of GitHub and run two npm commands and be ready to go immediately.
Gotcha.
Now, the other reason these boilerplates are critical is because I think they lay a very basic groundwork for how more of the modern ES6 stuff is being handled. We're kind of in this in-between phase with module loading not being supported in the browsers, and so a major part of the boilerplates were just trying to help people get started so that they could go back and actually look at that basic setup.
Okay.
So not only can they help you get going, but I think they can also provide an example or insight into a basic setup when you get more complex and including a script file. Yeah.
Okay. Another question here we have, I know you said you haven't got to grid yet, but we can look forward to replacing the grid.data.transport with an Angular 2 service. So that question more speaks to the pluggability of the transport of the data source that we have in Kendo UI. And I guess the question is relating to how you can use an Angular 2 service to replace that infrastructure. Because that transport is pluggable, nothing prevents you from replacing it. I'm not going to speak to Angular 2 specifically, but I'm going to say that nothing replaces you from implementing your own. So we have two main classes for it. We have what's called the local transport and a remote transport. The one you're going to be concerned about is the remote transport. And what the transport does, it just provides you hooks into the CRUD operations, create, retrieve, update, delete, that you write for a transport extensibility mechanism, if you will. And if you want to read more about that, I wrote about it extensively. I wrote a custom transport for Firebase, which is a real-time database service provided by Google back in the day, back in 2014. And I showed an example of how to do that. Nothing would prevent you from doing the same. And so you just replace the transport for something you want to target, whether that be Angular 2 or whatever. And well, we'll have time for 2 more questions. Do you guys have one question that you guys would like to answer quickly?
Somebody asked about like online demos for the React components.
Okay.
At this point, I'm not aware of a online demo. I could send you a URL and you could go to.
Okay.
This is sort of another reason I created the boilerplate, because if you download the React boilerplate and just follow the simple instructions, that is a demo for the buttons. So that's about. Can you guys? I want to make sure I'm not speaking too declaratively here. I'm not aware of a demo online for the React.
Neither am I. But to your point, I think you're right. I mean, it's probably a few lines of just executing through the terminal, and then you're up and away.
Yep.
Todd, any last question that you want to just answer quickly here before we end up the webinar?
Yeah. A lot of people have been asking about the Angular 2. When's it coming? So at the moment, the development team are obviously reliant on the Angular team. So as soon as the Angular 2 becomes stable and you see that first release, I would, number one, follow us on Twitter, as in the Telerik account. So we'll be tweeting about things that are happening, but also follow the Angular account, because they'll let you know when Angular 2 is in that stable, and it shouldn't be too much longer, but you can expect to see something a couple of months after, because we're basically working on things alongside the changes that Angular are currently making with the release candidates. So
yeah,
yeah,
I understand people's frustration as well. I mean, like it's definitely everyone's itching to go. So we sympathize with folks. All right, I think that's all the time we have. I know we ran a few minutes over, but we did want to answer some of your questions here. Thank you all for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. And don't forget, we're going to be following up this webinar with a blog post which will summarize a lot of the questions that we got in here today, as well as provide links to some of the demos that we showed during today's webinar. Don't forget to download the latest bits. We've got them available up on the various sources you saw referenced during our webinar. And hopefully we'll see you online. And if you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to reach out to us or send them through our feedback channels. So once again, thanks, and we'd like to wish you a good day.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.